Hi everyone, welcome to episode 30 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. For the first time since the end of June, I'm back in person. There will be no more cheap and easily produced quiz shows until next July. Every year I take my vacation through July. I don't do anything for YouTube or the Driver Suit blog or my normal job. I'm on vacation, so I got to hang out with some of my friends. I had some good food and drink, and I even bought myself a pinball machine. And I feel great, I feel relaxed, and now I'm going to catch up on some of the stories that took place in the world of racing while I was away. We're going to get started with some NASCAR news. I'll get to the street race in a little bit, as I have a lot to say about that. So on June 23rd, the office building next to the NASCAR Hall of Fame was changed from NASCAR Plaza to 55 South. Now, NASCAR has a lot of connotations attached to it, not all of them good. Some of them are not good. And so it was decided that they're going to change it from the NASCAR Plaza to 55 South. And they're doing this basically to attract newer tenants, which I think is a smart move. Now, it is noted that even though it's not NASCAR branded, NASCAR's operations will still take place there. Yeah, but I'm kind of sad to see it go, but it is what it is. Now, another NASCAR-related story that I found kind of interesting that was mentioned on J-Ski was that the state of Dale Earnhardt Sr. and NASCAR are going to be working to release some new Dale Earnhardt Sr. merch in the very foreseeable future. Now, his estate is run by his late wife, and regardless of what you think of her, there's always been a lot of Dale Earnhardt Sr. merch. But there's going to be some new merch going in new directions, like Funko Pops, that are going to be released soon. Now, I don't get Funko Pops, but I'm 40 years old, so you can call me out of touch. I'll gladly accept that. But now we have to get to, I think, the one really sad bit of news that took place while I was away. Olin Burton Smith, better known as Burton Smith, passed away on June 22nd at the age of 95 years old. In addition to building Charlotte Motor Speedway and founding Speedway Motorsports Inc., the first publicly traded speedway company, he was also instrumental in updating the tracks over the years. And they were also known, both Burton and his assistant Humpy Wheeler, they added interesting pre-race shows, and they've sort of become a standard in American racing. I don't think it is fair to overstate his importance to the sport. I mean, he basically took racing from just racing to let's give the fans something to show up for before the race, get their appetites ready for the main event, which I think is sort of become not just a thing in auto racing, but a thing in sports to a certain degree. Now, he wasn't alone in this. There were others in other sports who were doing this, but he certainly was instrumental in making this a thing in racing. So, we're going to jump ahead to Pocono weekend. I don't know what teams are thinking when they do certain things. If they just seem to think that no one's going to notice or they're not going to get caught. But that's exactly what happened after Pocono last week. So at the Pocono race, Denny Hamlin in the number 11 finished first, Kyle Busch in number 18 finished second, and they were both disqualified after post-race inspection, which apparently was the first total disqualification of a winner in like 62 years. I think one of the estimates I read was. I'm trying to remember, wasn't there something with Joey Logano a few years ago where it was something along those lines, but he kept the win? This time, he's completely lost his win. Denny Hamlin has lost his win. Kyle Busch has lost his second place finish, so Chase Elliott is now the winner of Pocono. Now, I have to quote Brad Moran, the NASCAR Cup Series managing director. He was talking on, I don't know if it was if he was just talking to the press or on a call. I didn't get the, I can't even think of the word, but he was quoted as saying, and I quote, "Unfortunately, we were doing our post-race inspections, which we do. There were some issues discovered that affect aero of the vehicle. The part was the front fascia, and there was no reason why there was some material that was somewhere it shouldn't have been, and that basically comes down to a DQ. It's a penalty both for the number 11 of Denny Hamlin and the 18 of Kyle Busch have been D'd. Their vehicles are being loaded in the NASCAR hauler, and they're going back to the R&D center, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. The final results have been changed to show what the two DIs were there, and that they'll have the opportunity to appeal, and it'll be all sorted out by next week." He then went on to state, quote, "I can't get into the details of what the issues were, but both the vehicles have the same issue, and unfortunately they were not acceptable to pass inspection." A couple days later, Wally Brown, who was the director for Joe Gibbs Racing, issued a statement stating, quote, "In our review of the post-race infractions on the 11 and 18 cars at Pocono, it was discovered that a single piece of clear tape was positioned over each of the lower corners of the front fascia ahead of the left front and right front wheel openings in both those cars. The added pieces were 2 inches wide by 5.5 inches long and had with a thickness of 0.0112 inches installed under the wrap. This change in our build process was not properly vetted within the organization, and we recognize that it is against NASCAR rules. We apologize to everyone for this mistake, and we have made changes to our process so that it does not happen again." Did they honestly think that nobody was going to notice? Whoever did this, did they honestly believe that they could do this and get away with it without anybody noticing? Teams were getting fined because the windshields would heat up and expand, and it would cause troubles in inspection. Did they honestly think 2 very visible pieces of tape weren't going to go unnoticed? You idiots. And then, a few days after that, there was something that came out of the NASCAR R&D Center, because in addition to the 11-18, the 34 and 47 cars were also taken there for further inspection. And for those of you who don't know, that's something that NASCAR does. They'll just take like 2 random cars to the R&D Center for further inspection. So later in the week, there was a third penalty issued, this time to the number 34. It was specifically, it was an L2 level penalty, penalizing the team 100 driver points and 100 owner points. And it comes under sections 14.1 C, D, and Q, as well as sections 14.5 A and B in the NASCAR rulebook. And those rules apply to the body and overall vehicle assembly rules surrounding modification of a single source supplied part. Now, unlike Joe Gibbs Racing, Front Row has appealed the decision. They state, quote, they stated they didn't state what it was, but they said they would be appealing it. Now, this last story I kind of saw coming. I think I predicted it. But yeah, it's come true. So, Camping World was indicating that they would no longer be sponsoring the Camping World Truck Series at the end of their current contract. Well, it was announced by Marcus Lemonis, Marcus Lemonis. I'm just going to call him that. I don't care if I mispronounced it. He said that he's not renewing the titleship for the Truck Series. And this is what he wrote. He posted a picture of text. I'm going to read this as it was written. "What an amazing opportunity it's been. 14 years, over 30 race entitlements, over 35 drivers sponsored, and some of the best fans one could wish for. Thank you, NASCAR. marketing and sponsorships continue to build and expand our Camping World business. But it's important to realize that work in the business every day that makes it go and grow. In acknowledging what matters most, our people, we have made the decision to reallocate those marketing dollars towards increasing the income and benefits of our people. From my perspective, there is no better money spent. This is something, by the way, that really annoys me when you do something like this. Don't just capitalize random words for the hell of it. Just write it like a normal person. It's not like you have to worry about the 240 character levels. If you're posting a picture of text, just write it like a normal person. And apparently, there is no better money spent. Well, apparently there is, since you chose to end the sponsorship. Now, all kidding aside, this is going to be a big move coming forward. And if you're wondering who's going to take over the sponsorship, the rumors, and I swear I'm not making this up, if the rumors are to be believed, Craftsman Tools, the original sponsor of the Truck Series in 1995, is rumored to be the lead one. And if the Camping World Truck Series becomes the Craftsman Truck Series, you talk about going for a circle. That would make me a very happy boy. I'd be as happy as a poet on payday. I would love for the Craftsman Truck Series to be a thing again. Okay, so that was a lot. Let's take our first break. We're going to cover some stories that were non-NASCAR in the world of racing. So I'll see you in a bit. So I'm back from my first break, and we have some other stories from the other areas of racing. NASCAR is not the only form of racing in the world. And I'm going to start with the NHRA. And this isn't really so much of a news story as much as it is confirmation of suspicions from my end. And I think for a lot of other people too. Now, I have a lot of respect for Don Schumacher Racing. Going to the Route 66 Nationals helped reignite my drag racing fandom. They are currently the winningest team in the professional categories of the NHRA, and for a while they've had no issues with sponsorship and a lot of top-shelf drivers. Now this makes the breakup of DSR at the end of last season very confusing. Ron Capps took Napa with him and founded his own team. Antron Brown took Matt Gold Tools with him and founded his own team. Leah Pruitt left, took several sponsors, Matt Hagan, founded her own team with her husband, Tony Stewart. Now, these details they seem to come out of nowhere, and a lot of people were wondering what was going on, since most of the people involved weren't talking about why these moves were happening. Now, recently, a couple of news articles, one from Auto Week and one from the Leaf Chronicle, shed a bit of light on the matter. Now, as I suspected, I think because Schumacher was getting older, he wants to retire, and he doesn't want to be working with as many programs as he was. That's basically it, because he's getting older, he's less involved with the team. It looks like he's getting close to retire, and he's got couples, Joe and Kathy Maynard and Kimberly and Eric Lehman, taking over the team. They're basically toning down, looking towards the future, a future without Don Schumacher. And I mean, yeah, it's sad to see a team like that go. I really do kind of miss it, but at the same time, I'm kind of torn on it, because as sad as I am to see the team go, I do like the idea of more smaller teams as opposed to several big super teams. I think smaller teams don't get a lot of respect in this day and age, especially in the major categories of auto racing. Yeah, but so we're going to move to Formula Car racing now. And we've had some crazy stories come out over the last few days. So, the first story we're going to do is discussing IndyCar, because this story I've just been following out of morbid curiosity. Because driver Alex Palou finds himself on the wrong side of lawyers, which is a place no one wants to be. I've grown up around lawyers, and I can tell you that that's not meant to be a joke. You don't want to fuck around with the lawyers. So what's exactly going on? Well, we have to go back to July 12th. So on July 12th, Chip Ganassi Racing issued a press release stating that they would retain Palou as a driver for 2023, and Palou was quoted in the press release. Okay. Typical, thing that happens. I couldn't think of the words there. But Palou would go on to deny this, and even went so far as to claim that the quote that he was quoted was made up by the team. Now, depending on who you ask, this is not an uncommon occurrence. Depending on who you ask. I'm not an expert in press releases, so I will not say one way or the other. So literally less than a minute later, McLaren Racing announces they have signed Palou for 2023, though in what capacity is unclear, whether it be Formula E, Formula One, or IndyCar. Ganassi then proceeds to reiterate that Palou is still going to drive for them for 2023, and this led to some conflicts. And to shorten a very long an explanation, the three sides are still at an impasse with each other, and as a direct result, Ganassi has filed a lawsuit against Palou. Now, at the time of recording, Palou hasn't said much, but Ganassi has said quite a bit. This is a statement that was issued from Ganassi. Quote, Alex Palou is under contract with Chip Ganassi Racing for the end of the 2023 season. He's a valued member of our team, and we will continue to support him chasing wins, podiums, and IndyCar championships. As the result of a competing racing team improperly attempting to contract with him, notwithstanding the clear terms of our contract, we are proceeding to legal process pursuant to the contract. Any and all inquiries on the matter will be held by our legal counsel, end quote. I'm going to take an educated guess as to what was going on. Number one, it's obvious that Palou is not happy at Ganassi Racing. I mean, you won the championship last year. Why wouldn't you want to sign a long-term deal when you have a championship-capable team around you? And as of the recording of this, you're third in the points. You are very much within the championship picture. I mean, how unhappy is he? I've never, in all the years I've been following racing, I've never seen a driver who wins a championship and then is so unhappy in his current position he tries to get out of it. And I guess what he thought was going to happen. Well, I think there's two things that he thought was going to happen. Number one, he thought that he could get out of the contract after 2022 because neither side had said, because Ganassi hadn't said they were picking up the option. So he just thought, okay, I'm free to negotiate, and he signed a deal with McLaren. What then proceeds to happen is Ganassi gets a hold of this, and they find out what's going on, and they're pissed, and justifiably so. So they go, you know what? We're exercising the option. We're keeping you for 2023. But by that time, the paperwork had all been signed. So, for all intents and purposes, I don't know whose side should back down, to be honest with you, because if you have a championship winning driver who's a defending champion, who's so unhappy in his current position, he doesn't want to stay for another year, and he's very much within the championship picture. That says something about your organization. And before you say, well, how do you know he's unhappy? Why else would you want to leave a top shelf team when you are a championship competitor? What sense does that make? There's something going on where he's not happy. That's definite. But number two is Alex Ballou. Wouldn't you have gone to the team and said, look, I'm miserable. I want out. Please don't exercise the option. Now, it's also that he probably did that. But it's just this was handled badly by all involved. And the one who's really on the losing end of this is Ballou. Because it doesn't make him look good, but he's also the one who has the most to lose in this situation. Because if he does leave Ganassi can replace him. And I'm sorry, I'm not sold on McLaren's IndyCar team. I'm also not sold on their Formula E team. But it's just, this whole thing is just a mess, and I'm going to be following this. And I'll be interested to see what comes out in discovery if this lawsuit goes anywhere. Now we're going to move on to Formula One, because there's a lot of nonsense going on. You had the French Grand Prix at the time of recording last week. You've got the Belgian Grand Prix coming up, which I'm going to be watching out of morbid curiosity after that disaster of a race last year. And then there came this bit of speculation from motorsportmagazine.com. This is actually, there's a link to it in the description. It's an interesting read. But I'm going to give you the summation. So at some point in the very foreseeable future, Formula One is going to announce the 2023 schedule. And according to motorsportmagazine.com, this will see the addition of Las Vegas, Qatar, China, and South Africa, which will be added to the schedule. I don't get Las Vegas. The other three I don't mind. But the schedule will also likely see the removal of Belgium and France from the schedule. And there's also debate about whether or not Monaco will be on the schedule long term. Now, Formula One would have to be the biggest morons on the face of the planet to lose that race. It's their version of the Indy 500. It's the most historically important race in Formula One, and it's one of the most, if not the most watched race in all of racing. So the issues that seem to be in play with Formula One is that their current deal is that Formula One only gets $15 million, and F1 also wants full control of track signage. But I think there's going to be a deal reached. I just don't see Formula One willingly losing Monaco. I think something's going to get negotiated because I don't believe that Formula One is that stupid. Now, the removal of Belgium and France from the schedule, I mean, I get France. It's not as big of a Formula market as, say, England or Italy. But it's still a decent market. And it's also reasonably close to Formula One's two main headquarters. Now, after the disaster that was the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix, I don't think that the way that Formula One handled it, I can understand why Spa doesn't want the race coming back, because they got egg on their face. Formula One has egg on their face. The fans are pissed, and justifiably so. Now, that doesn't mean a few years down the road it won't come back, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. I do enjoy watching the various races at the various tracks on both the French and Belgian Grand Prix, so losing them it's gonna affect the schedule, but again, down the line, I hope people come to their story. People come to their senses. Sorry, it's been a long day. Okay. I've been dreading doing this story. So this is from an article by Chris Medland on Racer.com, There's a link to it in the description. It's a great read. I'm just going to read this. I want to point out that I was wrong about Michael Massey staying with Formula One into 2022. That was a mistake on my part. I apologize. I couldn't find any information one way or the other whether or not he had actually left the sport. But again, back to this article by Chris Medland. Michael Massey has officially left the FIA 7 months of being stripped of his Formula One race director role. The Australian lost the position after the controversy surrounding the handling of the championship-deciding Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, where he chose to allow only the lapped cars between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen to unlap themselves, thus setting up a final lap shootout for the title. After a long investigation over the winter, it was found that these regulations were applied incorrectly, but the FIA admitted that Massey had been placed under unfair pressure due to the availability of teams to speak directly to him during the race, as well as the other rules he had to fulfill. Okay, we're going to pause right there. What other roles would he be fulfilling in the FIA? If you have a guy who's in charge of the biggest and most watched racing series in the entire world, why would you give him other shit to do in addition to that? Moving on. Quote, as part of the fallout from that investigation, Massey was replaced with 2 race directors who now share the role. I apologize if I mispronounce these. Eduardo Freitas and Nellis Wittich, while Herbie Blash has also been brought in as a permanent advisor to support. In recognizing the overhaul that was required of the race director, the FIA stated that it wanted to keep Massey in a future role, but it has now been confirmed he has left the governing body. The FIA confirms that Massey has decided to leave the FIA and relocate to Australia to be closer with his family and take on new challenges. He oversaw a 3-year period as Formula One race director and safety delegate following the sudden passing of Charlie Whiting in 2019, carrying out the numerous functions he was tasked with in a professional and dedicated manner. The FIA thanks him for his commitment and wishes him the best for the future. Which sounds like when WWE releases somebody, they say well, we wish you the best on your future endeavors. But Massey has yet to comment publicly since last year's Abu Dhabi race, which I think is very telling. And again, this was taken from an article by Chris Medland on Racer.com. Go on and read it. There's a lot more information there, and it's much more well written. Personally, I don't believe for a second that this was a willing decision on his part. I think the FIA saw him for what he was, utterly ill-prepared for the role, basically not even able to understand the basic rules of Formula One. He just wasn't good at what he was doing, so he was forced out. I don't believe for a second that this was if it was because he was going to get fired anyway and he decided to go out on his own terms. So here's my question, because I was thinking about this. After all the bullshit that he put Formula One through as race director, after all the bad publicity and after all the scrutiny and after people are even today doing hashtag Lewis Hamilton won or stuff like that because they're still convinced that Massey threw the race for Red Bull. Now, as I've said, Massey's just incompetent. I don't think he was bribed because, number one, the amount it would take to bribe him would be more than any business would be willing to spend on such, and there's no way you'd be able to do it without leaving a paper trail. So I don't think it was bribery, it was just incompetence. But why would you keep him in the FIA when he's proven himself not to be good in the one job you need him to be perfect at. Like if someone at work fumbled up and cost the store $1,000, you would never see that person again. This guy cost the sport millions in terms of bad publicity, and he's kept on. And this is not like a private organization. This is the FIA, the major safety sanctioning body in auto racing in the world. He's completely incompetent. He loses his job as the top guy in Formula One, and you wait 7 months to get rid of him? I mean, how? How do you get that level of job security? It's like NFL coaches. Hugh Jackson, who we've talked about in the past, during his first 2 years as head coach of the Cleveland Browns, his regular season record was 1-31. He won a single game and lost 32, and he was still kept on as the coach for a third season. How do you get that? How do you screw up as badly as these guys do and keep your job? I hope, and I will say this new regime is so much better than the old regime. It's so much more respectable than the old regime, so it's a net positive. But long term, there's obviously issues that need to be addressed that aren't being addressed. There's obviously problems in Formula One that are going to have to be addressed at some point that just simply aren't. And I hope they do get addressed, but unfortunately they probably won't be. Now we're going to take a break from racing because we're going to talk more about the LIV golf situation because, again, this has spiraled out of control while I was on vacation and I just can't not talk about it. So I'll be right back. So we're back with this vacation news story roundup, and I'm not a fan of golf, but I've been following the LIV PGA war because you can't not see the similarities to the card IRL split of the 1990s, and two other things that I follow have had bad deals with Saudi Arabia, and I'm transfixed by all of this. Now, it should be known that before this fiasco ever started, both the WWE and F1 have had serious issues with Saudi Arabia. And golf is now up to their neck in this too. So, when we left off, the PGA Tour commissioner had suspended some players and was basically making it clear that he was not happy with the LIV situation. Well, not long after that all took place, Jay Monahan announced some changes to the PGA Tour. Now, these changes include schedule, structure, and other changes to the Tour and the FedEx Cup. Now, according to Golf Digest, link in the description, these changes include that the PGA Tour will turn to a calendar year schedule beginning 2024. I have no earthly idea what they were running on prior to that. The FedEx Cup playoffs will be reduced from 125 players to 70. I think even 70 seems a lot for a golf tournament. Purses will be significantly raised for 8 events, and 3 international events will be introduced in the fall for the top 50 in the prior series FedEx Cup standings. Now, if Monahan wanted to give off an air of confidence, his quote didn't exactly do that. In reference to the LIV league, Monahan stated, quote, "We welcome good, healthy competition. The LIV Saudi Golf League is not that. It's an irrational threat, one not concerned with the return on investment or true growth of the game. When someone attempts to buy the sport, dismantle the institutions that are intrinsically invested in its growth, and focus only on personal priority, that partnership evaporates, and instead we end up with one person, one entity, using endless amounts of money to direct employees, not members or partners, towards their personal goal, which may or may not change tomorrow or the next day. This begs the question, what's the end game from either side? The PGA Tour, they're the established group. They're the forefront of golf. They have all the name recognition, the big names, the most established names, the biggest tournaments, and the most well-established tournaments. And second off, nobody is questioning their intentions. What LIV is trying to do is an enigma. They're hosting a number of international tournaments with lots of money, but they don't seem to have a clear goal on holding tournaments. They're spending like $250 in total prize money, according to Mark G. Burns of MorningConsult.com, but there is no clear path to making this money back. And what do I mean by that? You can't watch LIV on television. You have to go to either Facebook or YouTube or their website. So how do you plan on making your money back in this manner? Someone explain this to me, because I don't see this working out. Now, I referenced Morning Consult. They had a really great statistic-based article, which is linked in the description. Another very interesting read. So I'm going to quote the article directly. So quote, Morning Consult data found that 16% of PGA Tour fans said they watched the inaugural LIV golf tournament in London from June 9 to 11. When analyzing viewership by demographic, just over 1 in 10 Gen Zers, 13%, said they watched the competition. Good for the top spot among all demographics. LIV Golf live streams coverage in the United States on Meta's platforms, Facebook's, Google's, YouTube, and its own website. In addition to the sports streaming service DAZN, or DAZN, viewership has been modest through 2 events, and experts agreed that LIV Golf must put its programming where sports fans are already accustomed to watching. Why you wouldn't have figured this out before your inaugural event, I don't understand. According to Ellen Zavayan, a sports industry veteran and professional lecturer at George Washington Law School, quote, if I was LIV Golf, my first priority would be ensure the greatest amount of eyeballs, and until they get a substantial U.S. television deal, that's going to be holding them back. Again, they have a lot of money, no television deal, no real credibility, most fans are taking them seriously, and there's no real path to success. It's sort of like the first years of AEW, but also like AEW, according to Eamon Lynch of Golf Week at USA Today, there are a number of golfers who are more than happy to take a giant paycheck from the Saudi-backed organization, and who can blame them? And Eamon goes on to discuss why he thinks that golfers are ripping off the Saudis. You don't even really have to make that compelling of an argument. If you're doing a job that you're good at, and somebody said, you know what, I'm going to pay you 10 times what you do, and you don't have to work as often as you do, who wouldn't take that deal? There's no real risk involved with that. Who wouldn't jump at that chance? The numbers make sense, but what the golfers don't seem to realize is that the lack of direction, the lack of any real path to profitability, is making this a bit more of a risk than it should. And then, as if LIV didn't need any more criticism or bad publicity, they got it because, to make things even crazier, our old friend Donald Trump a man who has placed money over ethics for his entire life, he just had to chime in on this. This is a quote from Trump. All those golfers that remain quote-unquote loyal to the very disloyal PGA in all its forms will pay a big price when the inevitable merger with LIV comes, and you get nothing but a big thank you from PGA officials who are making millions of dollars a year. And if you don't take the money now, you will get nothing in after the merger takes place, and will only say how smart the original signees were. Now, if he seems confident in the LIV's success, there's a reason for that. No matter what, you can hardly say that Trump is neutral, but since two of his courses are holding LIV tournaments, and he lost the PGA Championship at his Bedminster course, you can understand why you would say these things. In fact, in an interview with Golf Digest, he praised LIV while expressing his anger at the PGA. Quote, "I made a deal with LIV executives. They're very good people. They're very fine people. Greg Norman's been a total gentleman. He wanted to do this for years, and now he has the right backers. The Saudi money is unlimited. They can do the job right." I'm sure WWE and Formula One would agree with you on that, Donald. I think when you put up the first place prize money for $6 or $7 million, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to show up, to be honest with you. Look, nobody's saying that these golfers are doing this for the love of the game. They're doing it to make money. We get that. But, again, no profitability plans, no way to make it profitable, no long-term plans to compete, quote-unquote, with the PGA. Fan interest couldn't be any less enthusiastic. And in short, the LIV has a lot of money, no real fan base, no direction, more negatives than positives, and I fail to see them as a long-term threat because I just don't think they're going to last that long. You're going to have to prove me otherwise. With that, I'll take my final break, and then we'll get to the one story I've been dreading to talk about, the 2023 NASCAR Street Race. Now, with the final segment, I'm going to discuss the 2023 Chicago Street Race. So it was announced by Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, a large contingent of local officials, NASCAR's top executives, and driver Bubba Wallace have all announced it. The race will take place on July 2nd, 2023, and an IMSA race will be held on Saturday, July 1st as a support race. Based on the eNASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational Series course of the same design, because that's what you want to base a street course on, something that happened in a video game, because that never goes wrong. The 12-turn, 2.2-mile course will utilize parts of Lakeshore Drive, Michigan Avenue, and Columbus Drive. It will feature a start-finish line along South Columbus Drive against the backdrop of the famed Buckingham Fountain, and the course will include portions of Grant Park and even approach Soldier Field as well as the museum campus. In the words of Lightfoot herself, "When we started talking about this opportunity a year ago, the excitement among all of us, particularly me, about the possibility just went off the charts. This is a huge, huge sports town, and I think that goes without saying. The opportunity to bring something so unique as NASCAR to the city of Chicago, and I think it's going to be one of the most iconic race courses maybe ever, and introduce a whole new fan base to NASCAR, to what NASCAR is about in the city of Chicago. We couldn't pass up that opportunity." See, Lori, that sounds good, but it ignores one very specific issue, which I will discuss in greater detail later. So, Ben Kennedy, NASCAR's former driver and NASCAR Senior Vice President of Racing Development stated that when you think about Chicago, you think about the rich history of sports here. You think about the iconic skyline. You think about the iconic landmarks around the city. Navy Pier, Cloud Gate, commonly referred to as the Bean. A handful of them to actually have our NASCAR Cup Series cars racing around the streets of Chicago is going to be something incredible. Ben Kennedy then confirmed that this was in fact a 3-year deal and it will replace Wisconsin's Road America road course on the schedule for next year, but he was open about possibilities to the turn of that popular Midwestern track. Okay, where do I start with this? Let's talk about Lori Lightfoot's comments first, because she missed the mark completely. She talks about how much of a sports town Chicago is, and she's right. Chicagoans are passionate about their sports. One sport that they're very passionate about is wrestling, because you've had a lot of wrestling companies that have had a lot of success in the Chicago area. You know what hasn't had a lot of success in the Chicago area? NASCAR. It's not like NASCAR hasn't been in the area. I talked about Chicagoland Speedway and how it was just a cookie cutter track that brought nothing to the table in terms of either fan amenities or track design or something unique. Fans really didn't attend to it. The numbers got worse and worse every year. NASCAR has tried to make Chicago a thing. NASCAR in Chicago will never be a thing. You're going to have to accept it at some point. Now, contrary to the good things Ben Kennedy said about Chicago, there are also a lot of problems with crime, and this has been known to spill into the area that the race is going to be taking place at. Can we confirm with 100% certainty that these problems will not impede the race or fan attendance? No. There's no way we can. Now, in reference to the Music City Grand Prix, which is one of my biggest issues, the conditions of the roadway are a serious issue, and the logistics of shutting them down is another problem entirely. Now shutting down that area of the city is not unheard of. But the problem is, none of the times it's ever been shut down, the Lakeshore Drive area has never been shut down. We'll get to that in just a minute. But the Music City Grand Prix illustrated a series of problems with this approach. Because the track had so many issues, it actually had to be sanded down after the first day of practice because it was so bumpy, drivers couldn't keep their hands on the wheel. Okay? How is this not going to be an issue for the Chicago course? Explain it to me. How is this not going to be an issue? What plans are in place or are going to be put in place to ensure the safety of the drivers on the street course? Keep in mind, NASCAR has zero experience in this field. Chicago has zero experience in this field, so I'm justifiably worried. You have IndyCar, with the Music City Grand Prix, you have IndyCar, which has a lot of experience in street courses, and this was... The fact that nobody was seriously injured during that race is kind of amazing. Now, fan access is my third problem, because I didn't even think of this the first two times. But when you're shutting down Lake Shore Drive, or as its official name is Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable Lakeshore Drive, this is not like a minor street. This is a major artery through a major city. This is going to cause very serious problems for those who want to travel to and for to the race. Now, anybody who's driven in downtown Chicago can tell you that parking is a serious problem. There isn't enough parking to accommodate There isn't enough public parking to accommodate people during a normal workday, never mind during a giant auto race. And then, again, this is going to be exacerbated because Lakeshore Drive is being shut down, so you're just going to have problem after problem after problem with fan transportation. I can promise you this. Even Lollapalooza, even the Taste of Chicago, they don't shut down Lakeshore Drive. Now, the fourth issue, and there's probably some I'm not even getting to, but I'm going to cut this off here. This is a 3-year deal. Number one, you got rid of Road America for this. Why? Keep Road America. Take one of Kansas's 2 races off the schedule, and then then I'll be on board with it. But Kansas does not need 2 races, and Road America is too good of a track. In fact, I would consider it underrated. It's too good not to be on the Cup Series schedule. But this is a 3-year deal, as I said. Will this draw fans for all 3 years? I mean, it'll draw for the first year because it's the first NASCAR street race in history. But once the novelty wears off, will the fans keep coming? Again, NASCAR is not a major NASCAR hub, never really was. And the Chicagoland track has proven it thus far. And I don't think I need to remind you that we tried this with Chicagoland and Joliet. Now there's a $130 million racetrack that's nothing more than a car lot for cars waiting for chips. Chicagoland never really drew, and it has little to do with location. Because the NHRA race would always draw, and it's literally down the street from the Chicagoland Speedway. And when NASCAR tried this experiment with the Bristol Dirt Race, fans were into it for the first year. But after that, fan interest last year was high. This year, fans are just seeing through it. And I can't imagine it's going to last after next season's race, which I'm kind of stunned they announced, to be honest with you. But if this doesn't wow the fan base, I don't think it'll last all 3 years. I just don't see it. I don't think it's going to work. I've never thought it was going to work. I'm never going to think it's going to work. I don't know if I'm going to attend. Probably not. And I'm not watching this wondering if something's going to go wrong. This is Chicago. Something is going to go wrong. That's not the issue. The question is, what? Yeah. So with all of that said, I'm done. My summer vacation's over and I'm going to get back to my normal recording schedule. I'll have stuff to talk about next week. I'm Dave Firestone. See you next week for episode 31.